Hi students, welcome to this PowerPoint presentation and video about presentation tips. We're going to start with some basic PowerPoint organization. I'll talk about text, images, charts, and as I do that, I'll be showing you some sample slides. From there, we'll move to using slides effectively, how to use them as notes and a guide and not as a transcript. From there, we'll talk about some speaking tools, including transitions and some technical reminders for introductions and conclusions. And we'll end with some tips about practice and how to use a conversational tone when you speak. With this slide, we're going to focus on a few things. First, you can see that I can click one topic at a time. This is a great technique for the preview or any part of the body of the speech when you have multiple things on a slide to share. It helps keep the audience's attention focused on what you're saying. You'll probably hear me say this again and again. The other thing I want you to notice is the clarity of the text and the image. The image is not over the text, and the text is not over the image. You want to create your slides in a way that is as clear as possible for the audience to follow and understand. The final thing about this slide to notice is that there are short phrases, never complete sentences. You never want to use a complete sentence on your slide. You are the complete sentence. I will also say this a few times during the presentation today. So a short phrase is enough to communicate the idea, and then you, the speaker, you supplement the rest. Here's another example. This happens to be of another preview for a speech. So this student decided to do the preview into questions. You can do that if you want. They used who made it, how did it become a trend, what are the effects, why did it become a trend? And then again, the text is simple and organized, and you have a simple image. And actually the speech is about the trend of this image, keep calm and carry on. I hope that the first thing you notice about this slide is that you can't see my thumb, can you? Right? It's a really bad slide. There's too much text, and it's not useful for the audience at all. So here's a good point. Any text you have on your slide needs to have a purpose. If you're going to show a chart, you need to review the entire chart, and it needs to be easy for the audience to understand. Now, this chart by itself in the center might be effective without all the text. You, as the speaker, you provide the text. Another option is you use the image in the middle, and you have one or two words or a short phrase, really short, for each of the items in the chart. So here we are back with the preview slide, and you're going to notice a few things are crossed out. So this keeps the audience aware and abreast of where you've been and where you're going. These are called internal summaries and internal previews. Now that we've talked about the basic PPT organization, we're going to move to the next part, which is about using slides effectively. This is a great tool to use when you have a PowerPoint, or even if you don't have a PowerPoint, just in your tribute speech, for example, you could say, now that I've talked about this, I'm going to move to this. So let's talk about using your PowerPoint notes as a guide. You're going to notice again that I'm able to do each topic on a click. I talked about earlier why this is important. And it might really be nice to help focus your audience's attention as you progress through the content of the slide. In the perfect world, especially during the informational speech when you're required to use a PowerPoint, the PowerPoint should focus as your notes. You really don't want to have notes in addition to this because it can be very confusing. You have to focus on the PowerPoint, you have to focus on your audience, and then also focus on notes. It's kind of hard. You're going to strive when you practice to know your material. And I'm going to say this again and again. You're going to know it. You're not going to memorize it. You don't want to read it. You want to know it. And if you know it, it's going to come out naturally. And if you know your material, you'll be able to supplement the text that you have on the slide. That's the key. The slides are your guide. This is just another really good example of a clean PowerPoint slide with text and images that don't overlap, and the text is concise and in phrases, not full sentences. So let's imagine what the speaker of this slide said when they delivered this speech. Well, they said, here are some examples of how the shelter does good work in the community. First, they work with other shelters. PAWS, I'll just say that for an example. PAWS works with anti-cruelty. They work with shelters on the north side, west side, south side, all over the Chicagoland area. They also do mandatory spay and neuter. So now I get to tell you more about that. All the animals that come in to the shelter are required to be spayed or neutered. Finally, they do a really good job of educating pet owners, and this is important. Sometimes people adopt a dog and they're not ready for what's going to happen. They have to train the dog, they have to make sure the dog doesn't pee or poo in the house, and all of those kinds of things. So now you can see an example of how I would supplement the, the, the slide with my explanation. Okay, to sum up this small section of this presentation, the idea is that you never read, I'll say it again, you never read your notes. You use the notes as a guide. You use the PowerPoint as a guide. You also don't memorize. Sometimes students say, well, but it feels like I'm memorizing. Well, if you practice and you get to know your material well, you will memorize certain points. But the idea is that you don't expect yourself to say it the same way each time. The PowerPoint is your guide. Your job is to teach the material. If you have a PowerPoint, then you're teaching it. You're teaching it to your audience. And even if you don't have a PowerPoint, every time you give a speech, it's almost like you're explaining and you're teaching something to an audience. And if you think of it like that, it'll come out more naturally and in a more conversational manner. Let's move to the third part of this presentation, which is some speaking tools. I'm going to cover transitions, and then I'm going to review some technical things about introductions and conclusions. Here we are talking about transitions, which are extremely important. If you're writing an essay and you forget to use a transition or something, the person who's reading your essay has the text in front of them. They can always go back and read something from the previous paragraph. It doesn't happen in a speech. In a speech, you always have to keep your audience alert and abreast of where you are. So you can use transitions from the introduction to the body. You're going to use transitions between each part of the body. And you're going to use a transition to go from the body to the conclusion. For example, in the body, if you're talking about apples, bananas, and oranges, or apples, bananas, and kiwis, you're going to say something like, now that I've talked about apples, let's move to bananas. So apples is your first point, bananas is your second point. Now that I've talked about bananas, I'm going to talk about kiwis or oranges or whatever your favorite fruit is. And when you get to the conclusion, you can say something like, now that I've told you about, and you fill that in, you explain it, I'm going to start to wrap up my speech. Those are all things you can do to help the audience follow you from the beginning to the middle to the end. And when you start the body of the speech, sometimes people forget that they actually have to tell the audience they're doing that. You can say something like, now, let's begin with my first point. All right, let's talk about some technical stuff. Let's talk about the introduction to your speech and how that works with the PowerPoint. You do not want to start your PowerPoint or your speech with a topic. You do not want to say, good morning, good afternoon. Today my speech is about teen pregnancy. Today my speech is about the CTA. No. You say good afternoon, good morning, and you start immediately with your attention getter or your hook. This is important for the PowerPoint. So when you make the PowerPoint, do not put the title or the topic on slide number 1, because when you start showing it, you may feel like you have to talk about that. So the beginning of your slides should have something for your attention getter or your hook. If you choose not to have anything on the slide for that, that's fine. then you just keep on going with the speech. You do reveal the topic right before the preview. And I know you've already watched the slides about introductions and conclusions, so you already know the order of that. Attention getter, background, which includes listener relevance, then the topic, then the preview. The preview is perhaps the most important part because it tells the audience where you're going to go with your speech. So the end of your introduction, and you must have a slide for this. You must. There are no exceptions. You'll have a slide that says preview or outline, and then you'll have the 3 main points, just like you saw with teen pregnancy earlier. We're moving on to the conclusion. There's a couple of things you have to do. And I know you've already reviewed this in the presentation and PowerPoint about introductions and conclusions. Okay, so your conclusion. You signal the end. You can do that verbally by saying something like, now that I've talked about, or in summary, or you can do that with a pause, or you can move closer to the audience. Then the conclusion has 2 parts. You have the summary of the main points. Don't just repeat the preview, but somehow summarize broadly what you have talked about in the speech, and then you have a memorable ending or closure. This is different from the summary. It's an excellent way for you to connect something in the end to something in the beginning, just like you might do with an essay in a composition course. Make the speech come full circle. This is a really great technique and tool, and it's very effective. And now we're getting to the final point of the presentation, which is some final tips about practice and conversational tone or manner when you speak. There is no way around this. Practice is essential. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be. The more comfortable you are, the more conversational you'll be. And the more conversational you'll be, the more students will engage with you. I'm going to say this again and again, and I'm going to bore you with it, but it's true. Okay, how do you practice? If you have family members or friends, great, practice with them. Or classmates. If you don't, try your pets, and I'm not really kidding. You have to visualize the situation and space when you're going to deliver the speech. Or take objects from your house, your favorite objects, maybe a teddy bear, I don't know, something, and place it in front of you and practice with that. It is the key. And every time you practice, it is going to be different. So don't get mad at yourself. Oh, I can't do it, or it's wrong, or it doesn't sound the same. If you practice, you're going to be fine, and you're going to catch yourself, and you're going to be able to recover because you've practiced. That's it. And finally, your speech is a conversation. It is a formal conversation. It's also a one-way conversation. No one's talking back at you, but they are responding mentally, emotionally, and physically. And the more you can make it a conversation, the more your audience is going to engage with you and follow you and appreciate all the effort you have put into the speech. Nobody wants to hear you read, and nobody wants to hear you memorize. They want to hear you speak in a normal conversational way. And the best way to do that is to practice and to know your material really well. So that's it. Good luck and have a fun time making your speeches.